Thanks very much, everyone. This week we're excited to have Knikker of MVRDV with us. MVRDV is one of Europe's largest architecture practices and has offices in Rotterdam, Paris, Berlin, and Shanghai. Jan joined MVRDV in 2008 following a previous career as a journalist and also spent 10 years shaping the public image of OMA. Jan leads MVRDV's branding and has overseen the exponential growth of practice. I'll pass over to you, Jan. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start. Yeah, first of all, great that you're here and thanks for having me. I want to take you on a bit of a roller coaster through our portfolio today. And I really have a lot to show you. I was always also asked to talk about employability, but our HR people sent me such a gruesome presentation with lots of bullet points that I kicked it out again. And if you want to work at MVRDV after you saw all the things we do, if you're still there, then I can tell you afterwards how to do this. We started in the 90s when in the Netherlands, when there was an economic crisis and there were lots of young architects asked to come up with new ideas. And this was one of our first buildings. It's elderly housing, and the urban plan wouldn't allow to go higher, so we just docked some of the flats onto the structure. It's for elderly people, and if you walk there, you can actually feel the entire thing shake. And none of them are really scared because, you know, when you're 80, maybe you're not so scared anymore of that this thing falls down. Later, we turned social housing into something really good looking, perhaps. You could also say this is for Miami, but it's in Amsterdam and one of the worst neighborhoods as a transformation project. We work on all kinds of scales, also really small, like here, this is the only, we have built two things in Britain. One is still standing, and that is this one. It's a holiday home for Alain de Botton to actually get people that go there and rent it out. You could go there and rent it out, and you're supposed to talk about the architecture. And we believe that this would actually cause some discussion. We do public buildings as well, and also large-scale master plans. We do also interiors and gardening. So like you at the university, we have this idea that architecture should not specialize too much. And it's really difficult in getting new projects, but we also believe that you can do anything from a vase to actually restructuring the entire planet, which was one of our more modest projects. We also run a university department at University of Delft. We call it the Y Factory, and they're dreaming about the future of the city. It doesn't have to be rational, but it has to be radical. So here, for example, is a project that wants to make Amsterdam a biodiverse city, as many species and animals as possible together with humans. And what we also do, we publish these books then, and you can perhaps find them in the library. In the 90s, we grew up with this idea that the resources are going to end, the warning of the Club of Rome, which is more actual now than ever. We also knew that we were running out of space and resources, so that if we all would live like Americans, we need our planet many more times. And in a very Dutch way, we then said, okay, let's not, in Germany, they always tell you we need to do less. We always want to do more, and perhaps in a better way, because otherwise it's not very optimistic, and we want to be optimistic. In the Netherlands, we have this idea that you can shape society. We have built our own country, and these are two doors that actually protect Rotterdam. Each door is as big as the Eiffel Tower. So there's a very strong belief in solving things with technology. And Winnie Maas, the founder of MVRDV, actually grew up with these visions of the future, that in the future, if the Netherlands are gone, we would all live in floating cities. And so there is a strong belief that architecture can shape things and society. So we also, what maybe is less known about the Netherlands is that we're like Los Angeles. We have lots of motorways and an endless urban sprawl, which is super comfortable to live in, but also really bad for the environment. However, if we would live more densely, how we should be living as humans, we experience a lot of stress, and also these buildings actually, which was the one before COVID. And people live like this, and we believe this is a really bad thing. And so sometimes we're then a bit naive, and we want to put those two conditions together. So suburban lifestyle together with density in the city. And for many years, that was also our philosophy in terms of sustainability, because urban sprawl is extremely bad. And if you have dense cities with high quality, you actually have a more sustainable city. This is the pavilion we built for the Netherlands in 2000 at the World Expo, and it's a stack of Dutch landscapes. And what we tried to prove here and is that you can actually create nature in an artificial way, like the Netherlands. And here we have on the 5th floor actually a forest. After the building was abandoned because of bad economy, the forest was growing there for 20 years without being maintained. So it actually worked. And so you can make density also nice. You could have parks in your buildings and so on. Also here we have about sustainability, we have a publication called The Green Dream, saying that green buildings are often quite ugly. Here, for example, in Germany, you see this is not going to be loved, and it's not a good way to do it. But also, for example, if you have only 30% facade openings, the buildings do not become more interesting or better. So here we are trying something about beauty. Can you make energy production actually beautiful? So these water lilies, they could be floating in Phuket, and well, is it beautiful enough? We also dream about cities that are literally covered in forest, and that's not greenwashing, but that is actually for biodiversity to make it nicer. And here is a vision for Munich, which is now hanging in the mayor's office. So we're dreaming. For us, sustainability is not just technology, it's really holistic. And you know, it's like water in a stream. If it cannot pass the stone on one side, it will pass on the other side. So every project needs to be really sustainable, but the way to get there is not one recipe. You have to find many things. Here I show you one. For a dock workers community in the port of Rotterdam, we actually had to design a library, and we said, okay, this needs to be a place where the book is celebrated and advertised, because it has the highest rate of people that cannot read in the Netherlands. So we wanted to make a pile of books saying, come and read. And so we built the book mountain. And the idea was this, that the people are watching television. Then one day they come into town, they see this big pile of books. They climb it, and then in the end they become intellectuals. This is a very old, inspiring society with architecture. So, of course, the city wanted to make money. That's also very Dutch. So the ground floor was reserved for a supermarket. Then they also needed some commercial office spaces in the building, a film house, a bridge club and chess club. And at the end, we had a lot of crap that we also needed to put into this library. And then the space, yeah, how do you still manifest the library? So we put them all together in a pyramid, and the library is on top. And we only have, at this, here is an entrance, and you enter the building, you instantly have to take the stairs to get into the library. So that's the concept, and this is the book mountain as it was built. Sustainable technology is in there everywhere. Also, the bookshelves are actually made out of planters from the flower industry. And but the most important thing is actually that it's sustainable to the community, and that people are reading more. And it works very well. Many kids that do not have a home where it's quiet because the television is running all the time, they go there to do homework, and that gives them a chance in life. And then, of course, it's filled with technology, and even the plants that you see in the building are part of the sustainability. It's basically, we harvest heat in summer and we harvest cold in winter, and then we use it to cool down and heat the building, which is a very simple and effective way. And we tried to make, and here you see in those, which the system doubles also as a sprinkler. So if it burns, then in winter you would have really hot water coming down, and in summer it would be cool. But we try to make it all disappear. So the idea is not that that it's a building where you see the sustainability, but here you need to see the books. because the books were the entire idea here. And also nice, the moment you walk up, you always have books around you, and we try to manipulate you to become this person that is interested in books while you are walking to all the other program that is also in the building. Now, this is also funny that you can actually get married in the library here. You have the first wedding, which is a couple of two women with all their kids, as you can see here, and now people walk to the roof and get married in the library, which is a big compliment that they picked this building. Another example is more of a big city thing. This is the market hall in Rotterdam. Has anybody visited yet? No? Yes? Did you like it? Thank you. So that is dealing with low budgets again, because we have basically two apartment buildings, one level of penthouses, and in between you have this huge space, 45 by 45 meters by 120 meters, which is a public market. Also a really big art piece, so you can live in the market. So here you have the interior with 100 food stalls. It's very popular. You can have cheese, of course, we're Netherlands. There's a big parking space underneath, which I will mention later again, but you can also live there. So here, for example, we have one of the rooms that is looking into the market. The further you go up, the more the wall is at an angle. And at a certain moment, you look down into the market, and also it's mixed because this is actually social housing. So we have 50% social housing, 50% commercial housing, and then 30 rich families on the roof, which is how things are as well. Of course, we have BREEAM very good, but that's not even the most, that's not the best rating. It's also not the best rating because we had to put a huge parking garage into the basement to actually relieve the entire neighborhood from cars. And but the thing is that it's really loved, and if a building is loved, you have less chance that it will be removed. And of course, in Scotland, you know all about it. I just read that Edinburgh has the most listed buildings in the world, and not building something is of course the most sustainable thing. And if you do not demolish it and you do not replace it, then it's also really good. So that is also in a way important. Yeah, sustainability, you know, if you leave it up to the market, which is a very British system, everything needs to be left to the market. But if you leave it to the market, it might not happen. So you also need very strong cities. So our politicians are asked to actually come up with good rules so that we will turn everything more sustainable. And here, for example, we're trying this on a city level. This just opened yesterday. The king was there. It's now a horticultural show, and it will turn into a city center where every plot has a plant as a partner. So it's a symbiosis again between plants and humans. On a larger scale for the Bay Area, we're looking into resilience, which is of course important there in terms of everything. Basically, this is a place where you shouldn't be living, San Francisco. And what's also important in our strategy for sustainability is transformation, transformed in one way or the other. And we're trying to do that sometimes totally invisible, like this building in France, where we're not supposed to really touch it. So we touch it a little bit with some glass, but you won't really see that we did something. Whereas it's perhaps more a challenge and more interesting for architects to look at this kind of structures. This is a building in the port of Gothenburg. It was supposed to be demolished, 1960s warehouse. We looked at it. We also looked at the structure, and we found out that it has a really good structure, and that it's strong enough to have a copy of itself on the roof. If we execute this in wood and not in concrete, which is also good because in Sweden you can actually build with wood a lot. So this is one of the strategies that we're also trying to use, and here you see it and how it hopefully will be completed one day. Yeah, going back to this building, it was empty for 20 years, and whenever I went there, there was a more decline, and there were more architecture students that actually went through the fence. Was heavily forbidden, Germany, verboten everywhere. Do not go here. So sometimes I came in there. There were two buses with architects in there, and whatever they did with the fences didn't work, the architects would always go in there. So this is how it looks now. As you can see, it had its best time, and also here we were asked to actually make a plan for it. And because it's very expensive, so we had to design student housing around it, and that would pay partly for the refurbishment of this building, which will be turned into a university quite soon. And then, yeah, it of course needs now a facade. In the beginning, it didn't have a facade, but yeah, you need to change buildings. Also very important, and I think this is perhaps the most meaningful participation we do in terms of sustainability. We work a lot in China. We have 55 people working on Chinese buildings, and of course they have built so much over the last 30 years, and this stuff was built fast and bad. And if they start to demolish everything, then global warming will accelerate even more. So what we're trying to tell the Chinese in all our modesty is, please have a look at these structures, whether you can save them. And this, for example, is in Shenzhen. This is one of these blue glass towers. When we're done with it, it will be looking like this. And within 10 years, it should have a good balance in terms of the amount of energy we put in and yeah, the maintenance. Also here, you come to China and you say, okay, look, you have these old factories, they're part of your history. It's young history. In Europe, we love factory conversions. And yeah, so we try to also tell them that their factories are worth converting, and they have done this with us. It's of course the building with the green roof, which is also nice. It's all bamboo. Well, and also a way for us to deal with sustainability, and we have done that since the early 90s, is to actually build buildings that you could change. And recently we have done one building which is really radical in this sense. We didn't even know what it would be while we were designing it, so we had to design it for all kinds of uses. They said it could be anything, just design it. They wanted to actually get the pavilion from Hanover into Munich, into this really cool place where you have container bars, and it's not so German, but it's kind of really informal. They even have on this orange building, there is a meadow with sheep on the roof, which is violating all kinds of German laws, but they still did it. And here's our building, which is called factory number 12. It looks as it's a transformation, but we built it again. We tried to make everything really flexible by having no core inside the building, have a very big building, 45 by 45 again. And so how do you get enough light in there? Well, we were also only allowed to have 5 floors, so we made 5 double floors. And so you get a lot of light into these floors. And then we said, well, the tenants, they can then decide by themselves to put in furniture, which is actually, you know, mezzanines and so on. We called them the potatoes, because it's like there was this potato powder factory. So, and that actually helped a lot with more square meters, but also made the architecture quite interesting. And so while we were planning, suddenly this fitness center said that they wanted to come in. And the plan was for a much heavier building than we indeed finalized. And so somewhere in the middle of the planning, we decided to put a swimming pool in on the, I think, the 4th floor. So here you see it. And you can swim there and see the roofs of the city, which is really nice. And what's, yeah, the letters, they are actually from the German makers of Donald Duck. So that was an artist competition, and they won, and there were lots of people that wanted to put something intelligent on, but instead it's really good with this neighborhood. It's less formal. So how is it used now? So we have gastronomy, we have 3 layers of fitness, then we have an office, the Audi Innovation Center is in there, and a short stay. Basically there is this penthouse for DJs because they can really have after parties with a lot of noise and nobody cares in this building. And in the future, it could be easily changed perhaps into having a disco, market, office, shopping, whatever. It could also be housing because it's so flexible and you do not have to demolish the building. You can basically just do the interiors in a different way and anything goes. And they actually crowned it the best building of Germany last year, which was really nice because normally this is one of these, you know, granite monsters that they built there. Of course, we need to look at the 17 SDGs. Maybe you're working with them as well, but we're trying a lot. We have developed these toolboxes that everybody in the office can actually see what they can introduce into the projects. Of course, we have all these certificates, but they're really not enough. So we're also looking into a climate pledge. We're at this moment testing whether we can offer more, whether we can promise more. And if we do this, then if our tests are successful, then in September we'll roll it out and make an official pledge to the public saying that we will be more and more sustainable every year and exceed these labels as well. But at this moment, we're still in the test phase whether it's going to work. Of course, carbon being the most important thing, and all the other things you see there, we're trying to put into the buildings, and it's not always evident because or easy because we work all over the world, and sustainability in Sri Lanka means something very different from Germany or France. So that's also something where we have to be super flexible. And in order to do that, we have these software people, a bunch of guys. The first girl is now hired finally. Architects that are also really good with software, and they're trying to help us along. So here, for example, you see the Space Finder, which is super interesting. It deals with urban regulations and let's say the potential of buildings. Can you do something to them? Can you densify them a bit more? So we want to go from these set rules in the city to perhaps more flexible rules. And we used Rotterdam as an example. This was the first test. So we put the entire city center of Rotterdam into a computer model. Then you see in yellow the sunspots. These are all places in the city center that have a right for a certain amount of hours of sun. And then we look at the maximum height and volume that you could build, which is this. So according to an urban regulation, this is what you can build. But then, of course, another urban regulation says that you cannot have that shadow on the streets. So here, our software then mitigates between those two regulations and 3 other regulations as well, because we like our rules in Holland. And in that way, if you then fully respect it, you see that we can still build a lot on top of these plots. And the plots where you can't build at all, they're all listed. So that's also our market hall is in there, and we said let's not build on that. But it's really interesting for developers because they can see which plot actually has potential, and it's interesting for the city to actually check whether the rules work. And when we showed this to the city, they were shocked that on the top part where there's the word shadow, there is a mountain of buildings, and that's certainly not something that they wanted to do. And so here you see high chances, low chances, and so on. Another one that our next team did, so next is new experimental technology, is looking at carbon, because normally you make a design and then you send it to an engineer. The engineer then looks at the carbon use in the construction process and the maintenance. What we're trying to do is bring this further into our design process. So of course the SDGs, 3 of them are the most relevant for architects, we believe 11, 12 and 13. And 13 has to do with the carbon. So here we look at the use of carbon, and this is what I explained, that usually the carbon calculation is way too late in the process to actually then change. So we have to live with the design, but have to find lots of things to actually make it better. Whereas now we want to have a prediction in very early on in the design process, because we make many design options, and then we also can actually discuss how carbon works. So here, if you have this, now a bathroom, so much carbon a year cucumber, that much carbon, we know these things. So we put that into a software, and we are looking at the very beginning of the design process, the construction process. And then we basically have a look at different buildings that we have done in the past and that others have done, and different elements and how much carbon they need, and also different materials. And all this we put together, and then we make our models, and we can then look at all these parameters, and the software then comes up with an estimate. And so here you see that, and the estimate is a bit fuzzy, but it gives you a range. It's an estimate, so at least it gives you a range, and you can then see is option number 1 better than option number 2, because the range is going to vary between these designs, and that's really. Here you see a table of our early design phases, and as you can see, it can go really anyway. We have here maybe 3 main ideas, 4, 5. But in the end, the stack actually did win, and then for the stack in the front, you see many different options. So we have a lot to discuss, and we used to discuss this on all kinds of other qualities, and now we can also automate it. We can give each of these options a carbon label, and that can be also on the table then. Yes, I want to talk a bit about the city, and I want to start really small. Rotterdam is the city that was bombarded during the Second World War and then rebuilt as a car paradise. And recently the city has decided to give less room for the car by making more room for the car. So they built lots of parking garages. One of them was in the market hall. That's also the reason that it has a bad rating, because it has 1,250 parking spots. So every one of them is a minus. And this is the neighborhood where our office is. And during COVID, they were sitting with this, you see, it looks like a parking space. There was no life left, and the shops, they would all suffer from this situation. So they asked us whether we could remove the cars and turn the street into a pedestrian zone, bicycle zone, and also extend the shops onto the streets, which we did within 3 weeks. It was done. Also, the city liked the idea. And that was a very new thing, that the store owners who normally want as much parking as possible said, get rid of the parking because we need more space. And that was a very nice thing. We then turned it into a larger experiment. We called it the mobility challenge, and we asked 90 people to give us their cars. They were locked away into a car park, and instead they would get a subscription to all kinds of other mobilities. And these 19 parking spots we then blocked with mobile parks. And that was really good for the neighborhood. And also here, for example, if you saw an open parking spot, you could just drag one of these mini playgrounds in front of your house, block the parking spot, and the entire neighborhood would become nicer with this. I also participated, and here you see the mobility hub. So you could take electric cars, big bicycles, electric bicycles, all kinds of things, so that you can flexibly continue with your normal life, go to the supermarket, buy a lot of things, and so on. So whatever you needed was there, but it was all shared and better for the environment. And what's really nice is that the result of this project is now that 30 parking spots have been transformed for good. And normally in a city in the Netherlands, if even one parking spot disappears in a street, the city will have lots of angry letters from citizens saying, you cannot do this. And now suddenly the people that live in this neighborhood, because they were part of this, said, okay, let's get rid of 30 parking spots, turn them into flower beds. And that actually has happened. We do that quite often. Here, for example, is this is an image of The Hague, how it used to be. In the 1960s, the planners decided to turn all these canals into streets. And today we're trying together with the people who live there to reopen all these canals and make them much nicer. Also, we want to build a market hall, but you see it's yeah, almost like a motorway, and this could turn into a much better place. And there everything is good. So every single party in the city council of The Hague said we should do this. We don't have money right now because each canal is 35 million euro, but still they yeah, anonymously decided, and that's really something, with like 15 parties, that they all want to look further into this, and it's all carried by people, and that's really something that we need to, we have this shared responsibility for the city, and maybe you as students are not stable enough in your life, but it's good later if you settle that you actually actively try to improve your surrounding, and maybe even as students you could already participate, think about your own street, see whether anything could be transformed and improved, and go for it. And the car is of course often a real problem. Also here in Korea, so we had this inner city motorway. It was crumbling, so that it wasn't safe enough anymore for cars, but it was safe enough for people. So we renovated it, and also within half a year only, we were able to turn it into a park. And we did that very with a lot of data. So there was scripting involved again. We have from A to Z in the Korean alphabet. We have all the plants that grow in Seoul. And we put them into planters because the bridge wasn't strong enough, like the High Line. That's a very strong bridge, so we can put half a meter of earth on it. We couldn't do that, so we had to work with flower pots. And this is then how it turned out into this linear park, 2 kilometers long, at Central Station. And yeah, it brings a little bit of green into this part of the city. You can look down onto the traffic. You can even you can have karaoke and all kinds of other things they like to do in Asia. But most important thing was, of course, that it's green, and that you that you have something different in this concrete jungle. 1 million people every month use this. Here, of course, the selfie, one of the most important hobbies in that place. The buildings on either side of this park, it changed, because there used to be this idea, more cars, more value, but today we know that in certain places, if you have more people walk, you have more value, and this is the amount of money invested into the bridge as a park, and then you have the amount of money that these buildings actually gained in real estate value. And that's something that's really great. We also saw that, for example, in the center of Madrid, that if you get rid of cars, then even the turnover of the shops could go up. Now, can you also do this on a larger scale? Because of course it's easy to do this in an inner city where everybody can come to. So Oslo is one of these booming cities in Europe, and they have a lot of new people moving there, and they anticipated that they needed a lot of new infrastructure to actually deal with this, and how to do this. And they asked us to come up with a vision, because we were planning this super big development for Norway, 360,000 square meters of mixed use, which is as big as one building in China. But for Oslo, this was a really big thing, and they wondered, how are we going to deal with all the traffic that is attracted here? That's not the kind of city that we want. And we looked at this, and it took us a while, but we then asked them, could we not build all these buildings without parking spots? Because on the other side, you have the central station, and would it not make sense? And so you start asking the biggest tenant, which is the bank, DNB, the largest bank of Norway, and whether the director would be able to actually do this. And he said, that's a great idea. I'm going to come with public transport from now on. And then nobody else in the bank could say no, because if the boss comes with public transport, it's good enough for anyone. So now we realized 12,500 workspaces, 450 apartments, and there are 20 temporary parking spots where you can bring your shopping and so on if you need to. And on the other side, you have not bullet points, but these are minuses. So it's minus 6,250 car journeys a day and so on. So you see, by just having buildings with less parking spots, the entire city becomes a much better place. So that was super simple and also much more economic. Everybody liked the idea. And then they said, yeah, but in suburbia, this is not possible. And indeed, that's not always possible because in faraway suburbia, you still need the car. Urban sprawl, again, it's not so good. So what did we do? We analyzed the entire metro system of Oslo Metropole and looked how you could actually grow and where you could densify a bit more. And what we then found out is, now we looked at all these metro stops. Is there any space left? And for example, we made like, I think 30 different researches into metro stops. The circle is a 5-minute walk around it, because that's the hottest area to densify. And here we found, for example, a river that was not so nice, and you could perhaps densify there. Now, and we made all these different ideas for the city. And then it's a decision of the politicians whether they want this. But at least we said you could do this if you can find the citizens to be on your side, because on one hand, the neighborhood might become more densely populated, but that also gives more services. And on the other side, the city doesn't have to invest. It could host 1 million new citizens without investing into new infrastructure. And we tried to do something like this also in Glasgow, but that was very, very, very difficult. Because most of the streets are not even that the city is allowed to talk about them, because it's kind of national roads. And so pedestrianizing even one street, putting trees into one street in Glasgow is almost impossible. And we had this Your City Centre project in Glasgow. And at a certain moment, we sent this big letter to the mayor saying it is impossible that a big city like Glasgow has only one person working in the urban planning department being responsible for the entire city center and has to facilitate investments. So there was very little, we felt there was, from a Dutch perspective, there was very little interest in the public good, and there was a lot of interest thinking that if you attract investors, it's good enough. So there is a faith in the power of the market. Even in Scotland, we were quite surprised. But the project is still going on with one of the offsprings from our office. So there is still hope, and hopefully it will one day look like this and be, because I walked through Edinburgh this morning, and you have all these gorgeous buildings all listed, and in front of them are nothing but cars. And it looks, it looks like a Morrison's car park. And it's like, really, is this how you want to treat your city? That's really sad in a way, no? And many places have done. This is a wonderful piece of inner city in Lyon. And here we also said goodbye to all these car parks and trying to give it back to the citizens, turning this into a much more also shopping centers that don't just absorb people, but that you can actually walk over the shopping center instead of having to move in there and turn eternal loops until you forget where you are. And that's also because your generation is maybe not so interested anymore in the car, and maybe you go with your bicycle, or at least on the continent. I'm not sure about you all out here, but without bags, because you do your shopping online. So why would you need to go to the city center with the car and do shopping there? So that also means that urban planning can be more relaxed and different. So here, for example, I take you to Bordeaux, which is a UNESCO World Heritage City. On the other side of the river, there are old factories, and the city wanted to plan on 35 hectares, 3,500 units, and a lot of mixed services. They have tried this before and didn't really succeed. So they were able to build this, and it looks a bit suburban. Huh? There's also people don't really live there, they sleep there. And so how could we make this, turn this into a better neighborhood? So we have lots of old buildings there. Bordeaux has already tried to build the city of the future. It didn't really work out. It looks really cool. You should go and visit it. And the problem there was that the pedestrians and cars were strictly separated from each other, very noble, but the pedestrian areas lack all kinds of social security and feeling. Now the old city is really good again, and when they asked us to plan the new city of the future, they said, can you please put the qualities of the old city in there? So that was the idea. Then the first thing you do, if you play for God, you don't just look at maps, but you also go there, you talk to the neighbors, and that's what happened there. Vinny went there and he actually drank tea with everybody. Then we had lots of events asking the people, what do you want? What are your ideas? And so on. Here's the site in Bordeaux. It's two old container stations and barracks from Napoleon. It was closed for a long time. And we said everything on the site is holy. You can never remove anything. So that was the start. Do not remove the history. Then we thought it was too wide and open, so we fill in the gaps. And this is then the plan that we made based on what we found. Simple. Then we said everything needs to share, like here in Rome. And sometimes actually the pedestrians have more rights, a bit like here in Amsterdam. We then, and that's where the mayor is getting really scared, we move up with parametric software 100 meters and say, okay, this is the basis. It's like, oh really? Because on the other side is UNESCO and they didn't want to see this and so on. So then we make cuts with this parametric software that you have sun and we cut it even a little bit more, that you have sun also in winter, 2 hours in every ground floor, so that you could also have housing there. And we contextualize it because the neighbors didn't want to see any of it. So we made sure that from any garden of the neighbors, you cannot see this entire new plan. Then we divide it into plots for 126 architects, because if we would build everything, it would become not so lively, huh? Because we're only one architect. So you need diversity. This is how it looked like. We also opened the place that people could come and have a look for the first time in 50 years. And then this is how it would be in the future with this parametric architecture. And it turned into an urban regulation, so you can never cut off one of these corners. So you have, as an architect, you have to work within this. Here again, the stables, how they look now and how they will look in the future. Now then, UNESCO, everybody was very scared what UNESCO would think, because this is how you see it from the other side of the river. And the mayor said, this is a green curtain and you cannot be visible above the green curtain. So, okay. So we went to UNESCO with two plans. Everything was cut, so that was really invisible. But we showed only our first one and they actually loved it. I said, it's like a modern version of the medieval city and people will be surprised what's going on the other side. So let's go for it. And it did not make them angry. And you know that Liverpool actually lost its status, so they're not always so tolerant. Then we made an art installation that you could actually walk through and look at it. And now we then started to design the public space. Also here, we didn't want to have too much monotony, so it needed to be very diverse. A botanic garden with lots of different plants. Costs a little bit more in the maintenance, but means also that if there is a disease, not all the trees will die in one go, but only a few. Then we opened the site. It became a really cool place. So if you ever go to Bordeaux, go there. Enjoy the cinema, the art, and the very, very expensive eco supermarket and bar. And then we started construction, and this will, of course, take 10 years to build all that. And we start, this is the Maison du Projet. So all the materials that you see on this facade are allowed. So it needs to look like the old city. It's all kinds of different beige and glass. And that's basically what you can do. And the first architect started, well, in one of the most boring plots, perhaps there is a hotel because it needs a repetition, but others are really exciting, as you can see here, these mountainscapes. And what's so nice about these corners is that you cannot make the same apartment over and over again, which also means that even in a small building like this, you might have students, families, old people living together, because the fill-in will demand all kinds of individual apartments. And this is how this architecture actually wanted to make it look like a bit like a ruin, but very nice. Here they built glass house. And here we made a big concession. We said, okay, for this combination of swimming pool and housing, this is the one place where you can actually remove the old walls, and you see them still in the outline, but it was better actually without the walls than with the walls. But the history is still a little bit there. We're building this thing that looks like a football has fallen into it, the Vallée Verte. And recently we did another one, and we have again a problem with the car. So many of these buildings, they need to house car parks underneath, but that's not everywhere possible because it's a flood area where the basements are used to make way for the river. So you can never go into these basements because they flood from time to time. And so we said, okay, we need a car park, but it shouldn't be visible from the street because that's not nice if you walk past the car park. So they should be like wrapped in apartments at least. And also in the future, we might, you know, the mobility challenge in Rotterdam, maybe we don't want to have that many cars anymore. And so we designed this big building in a way, you see here in greater car park, but in the future you could actually remove the central part because it's made in prefab and it could be reused somewhere else. And the apartments on the side, they are, so the ceiling height is a bit higher, and then you can refurbish them into apartments. So this is the future of this building with a lot of parking. And yeah, this is now underway. The other thing we said here is that nothing that we use in this building can be further than 150 kilometers from the site. So also that's really interesting. And it's very helpful because in Bordeaux we have a green mayor and he says that this needs to happen. So then the developers also have to understand and apply these rules, which is really cool. And here you see lots of different apartments, again, because of the irregular shapes. You will have lots of different lifestyles, and therefore you will have a section of the population and not just one full building with students and one full building next to it, but senior citizens. And these things are super important that we do not end up with a way too polarized society. If you meet each other in the elevator, maybe you start to talk and it's not your socio-demographic group, then perhaps this is the start of more debate. Right, and then the first buildings are now done, and you see they're really big, but they kind of fit in. They try to fit in at least. Here you see them from the other side, and it actually works. That's my son being totally annoyed that he has to look at architecture again. But you see how this is one of the biggest plots actually. It's massive. And it works, yeah, all works with these very, very strange angles and this parametric architecture that is quite unique. And yeah, here they tried, I'm sure you can see this part, they cheated a little bit. No, they made a really big balcony where there should have been an apartment, but it also gives a certain quality. So we, in the Q team, we said, it's good, let's do it. Yes, let's move out of town a little bit. Of course, you know all these places, everywhere in Europe, maybe even everywhere in the world, all around the cities, you have these boxes, branded boxes often, and they're not doing very well. So we were asked to think about the future of them. So we took an IKEA and we looked what else could you do with this to actually make it nicer. So we started by, can you not just put a piece of city on top? And then we actually are trying to do these things in reality as well. So here you see Utrecht. This is a conference center, you know, one of these big, really big halls where lots of people come from time to time to have the weirdest conferences, from Star Trek to real estate. And we're trying to put a park on the roof and have buildings housing all around. So it's actually possible. Here the same thing, shopping center in Paris, where we used the sites for a new program and a roof for social housing and sports and so on. And of course, yeah, also in these touristic areas, which is really interesting, you have these supermarkets. This is a supermarket from a German town. It's Lidl, German supermarket, and they have this building is one of theirs, and they build it everywhere in the world, also in Tuscany. Here you see the same thing. So this German building is one of the biggest export products in architecture from Germany, and they're allowed to build it anywhere. If you and I would want to build anything in Tuscany, we would actually have to apply very strict terracotta, the right stone, and. But Lidl is allowed to bring this German building right into Tuscany. The nice thing is that in the future they can do a lot of good things with them, because Tuscany is a place where it's not easy to build, but I think we will all be very happy if they densify this Lidl and turn it around. We even made a research of this, so we looked at all the, we were not allowed, because there was an Italian magazine, to look at Italian supermarkets, but we could look at foreign supermarkets. And if you just see the locations, you see that they are everywhere where there are no mountains, because in the mountains apparently the space is not enough to build them. So that's quite amazing, no? That a country that is so depending on tourism allows that much bad architecture to be built everywhere. And you could, of course, continue this with DIY stores and with large, all kinds of large other things. So also here, perhaps it's the one moment where you can actually also change this part of the countryside. In a place like Vaucluse, where you can absolutely not build anymore, the Lidl might be the place to do it. Here we're back to IKEA, and maybe we can do the green dip. That's something that we dream. You take a building, you dip it into blue and then into a forest, you take it out again, it's green. Not technically sustainable, but green is good for biodiversity and so on. And here in Jakarta, we are trying to do this with a shopping mall that, I mean, they go in and it's nice and cool, and outside there is a jungle and there's a lot of shadow and you don't really see it. What you see are green mountains. So that's the dream. Of course, it's good to have a park on the top. Also, that we're trying to do. In Germany, you see one of our projects where we actually bury a Lidl and a drugstore and all kinds of things, and we put a mountain on top. And this is going to be under construction quite soon. It's on American barracks, and the building you see on top is a monument for the past of the barracks. So we took one of the ugliest buildings in the world, we recreated it on top of this hill and told this area basically, look, this is how it used to be, but then we execute it in wood and in glass and make it a bit nicer. And then you can, in the future, walk all over Lidl and yeah. Well, I talk a lot about Lidl, but they're actually in a good construction program these days, and they're perhaps even trying to be more experimental, so it's a bit mean. Back to this one, what about agriculture? Because there's really big boxes. Could we have fields on the rooftop? And we're trying to do this in Taiwan, one of these wholesale markets where you have large trucks come in and out all the time. And instead of having a box with a metal roof that increases the heat, we actually have an undulating roof with a lot of fields. In the weekend, it will turn into a tourist market. And this is then from the top. You see the building that's going to be a restaurant, and the roof will then provide the food for this restaurant. That's the idea. We're quite far now, and it's under construction. It will actually be completed this year. They haven't found farmers yet. That's a bit difficult. Yes, how do you give an impulse to the city? That was a question that came to us from Rotterdam. We had wanted to celebrate 75 years of reconstruction after the war. One of the first buildings is the wholesale building you see here, was built so that the businesses could start up again. It had a great roof with ball holes, so people were dancing, there were restaurants, there was a movie theater, and all that, of course, 75 years later, was totally forgotten about, that it existed. So we drew this stair. On the other side, you have Central Station. And the idea was that you just have a stair to celebrate 75 years of reconstruction. And that was all. So we made a render and we walked around with the render to everybody in the city, said, should we not do this? Isn't that cool? The mayor said, well, that's difficult because this is the security zone. If there should be anything happening in the station. But somehow people wanted this and it worked. We made it out of scaffolding. It was built in only 3 weeks. And then suddenly people could walk to this roof, and you see there on the roof, this is the old movie theater, which was reopened. And so, yeah, you couldn't do anything but walk up, and 1,000 people every hour tried to do it. There was a long queue to actually go up this stair. Here you see it, and in total we had 350,000 visitors, 1,000 per hour. It was amazing what happened, lots of parties. It was once covered totally in fruit for whatever reason. There was Holland's Next Top Model, which of course didn't make it. Even the winner didn't become a new top model, but they walked down there. And also the hooligans of Feyenoord football club, they were there and they loved it. So everybody loved it. And then there was so much love, and so it was such a cool project, because afterwards we could dismantle it and use it again in other places. So it was also a party without garbage. And so we thought, when Britain asked us, or London asked us, do something for Oxford Street, said, oh, we're going to make something even cooler. We're making a scaffolding, we're going to make a mountain, and we cover it with a lot of greenery, and it will be the coolest party ever. So that people remember that Oxford Street actually exists. So Oxford Street was heavily hit by COVID. And so we thought that the Marble Arch Mount would be the best solution for this. And then somehow, yeah, there was a lockdown. We couldn't go there. The co-architect wouldn't talk to us anymore, and it was an incredible disaster. And we have never had more press than with this building. And let's just say, yeah, I shouldn't talk too much about it of your life. And probably you can visit me there then. But the thing is that what we wanted to say is densification and greenery in the city is super important. And for Rotterdam, for example, recently we made this manual how you can reuse the roofs of the city. So this is given, this book is given to the owners societies of every building in the city center of Rotterdam, with the request to look at how to reuse the roof. And then after Marble Arch Hill, you think we're done with these parties, but no, this summer actually in Rotterdam, and I hope you can all come there, we're going to open the rooftop walk in orange, as you can see. So you can walk over the roofs and you can see the first projects that are actually refurbished roofs. It's either a water buffer, it's public, or it's just green, so to reduce the heat island effect, or it's energy production. So one of these four things every roof in Rotterdam should actually do. And also the Architecture Institute, the former Architecture Institute, will get a rooftop from where we actually will talk about the future of the city. So yeah, I have to be a bit faster because I'm almost through my hour. Skyscrapers we also like to look at, and we like Europe a lot, even though the skyscraper is something from America and Asia at this moment. The biggest are being built in Asia, so you could say it's not a European typology anymore. But the question for us was, can we actually build a skyscraper with this kind of quality, these small scale? Well, if you look at the Dutch skyscrapers, you have them all here. They are very nicely designed, but they're also just boxes with nice facades, and that's it. If you look at them in context of the Asian skyscraper, you see that we're not more than the plinth of their buildings. So the sky apparently is much lower in the Netherlands. So at the Delft University, we then looked, how can we do this differently? How can we improve this typology? And we started to work with voxels, which is a little cube. And we started to build a model of a skyscraper in Lego. It was super easy, as you can see. And what we saw is that it's a really stupid thing. You can go in, you can go up, and you can look out, and you might or might not meet your neighbors, but basically you're all facing each other with the back. So if we change just one stone, you can walk out, you can look back onto the building, and maybe you can then invite your neighbors to have a barbecue. So that's the idea. Then you put this in the scripting software, and you let the scripting software go wild with parameters, and then you end up with towers that look like this. And that's really cool, because suddenly you have the same quality as this Italian fishing village. Right? People can see each other, talk to each other, go outside, and so on. The students then asked for 1 million Lego stones from Lego. They were super nice. They brought them to us. And then the university said, you cannot build the towers too high because students might die if one of the towers collapses. So here you see the maximum height that we were allowed to have, like in real life, regulations. And these towers were then moved to the Centre Pompidou in Paris, where you can see them. But our research wasn't done, so the students continued and made these fields of incredible amount of European skyscrapers. If you need one, you can get them. They're still in the university. And another 1 million stones from Lego. Super nice people there. And so we actually designed all them and made a publication called the Porosity to bring porosity into these closed buildings. So that's the theory. And would this also work in praxis? At that moment, we were asked to make a proposal for one of the last open spaces in Amsterdam Central Business District. And that was a very odd site because you had housing, offices, and sports, so nature a little bit. And what the city wanted is to include it all because it wasn't such a nice place and they had a lot of ambition with it. So we said, okay, we put it all together. Here you see we weren't allowed to fill this. This is the maximum volume because we couldn't build that much square meters. So we said, okay, we have a big plinth with shops, offices, and then housing on top, 3 towers. We give them a human scale, which is good in all kinds of qualities, and public space that you can actually walk around the central tower. You walk 5 up, walk around it, and then down. We called it the valley because there was a valley in between. Then you connect it all. And also really cool is that the offices can be transformed in the future into housing. So the cores are already prepared for that. Then we wanted to make it totally green, the green dip, that we dip it into a forest. And Pete Audorf, the garden designer of the High Line in New York, said that's nice, but it's a bit difficult because we have all these different climate zones. So and then we have a plinth with a museum and a lot of public program, of course, a restaurant on top. This is how we designed it and hoped that it would actually work. And everybody said this can never be done. And I get back to that because our scripting team actually made it possible. But you see here, this living room, for example, has lots of facades. Facade is expensive. Is this all feasible? And can you also make it green? So we have 4 different zones in the building, from the Netherlands to the Alps going up. Well, so you made this design, and then what the scripting team did, they put it into a software to have it optimized. And here you see 80 different options for one of the towers. The green ones are the best compromise between all these parameters, where the red ones are really poor. So all we did then is find 3 of the green ones and put them together in the building. And one of the most important things that was then followed is to make it more economic to build. And the scripting software was then actually looking at the natural stone that was on the facade, how to make it look. We then had to go for an irregular pattern because that was actually better with the irregular shape of the building. And I want to go to this indeed. So we have a very detailed Revit model that we used. Then we imported it into Rhino as lines, and we got rid of a lot of information. And in Grasshopper, we then made the scripting that gave lots of rules about the way to use the stones. But we start with 1 stone, and the idea was that the scripting software actually makes sure that there is no waste at all. So that whenever you make a cut in a stone, both parts can be used, or all 3 parts. And that we did with 44,000 pieces of stone. And that was then imported back into Revit, where it just came from lines, turned into 3-dimensional objects again. And they were then cut in Italy. They were numbered, were put into crates per section of the building. And the construction workers then could basically work with this kind of almost like an IKEA manual, right? So you how to build this thing. This now sounds like architects are not needed anymore. That's not the case. The first idea was by a human, and then actually even these computer-generated facade patterns we had to check. And here you see, for example, 3 mistakes. So somebody actually then checked the entire building, whether it looked good, whether there were no mistakes by the software and so on. And this is how we actually then realized it. And the price is very low. I'm not sure. I'm quite sure that they're more expensive here to build, but we were able to build this for 1,750 euros per square meter. And this is a building where everybody said this cannot be done. It's impossible to build this. And the scripting software actually made it possible that it would be built. We then built it. On the outside, we have a glass facade because it reflects the offices. On the inside, you have the human scale. And this is now how we are almost done with the building. You see the first plants are already done. Plants are super difficult. If the Bosco Verticale was delivered in Milan and it had small trees today, 5 years later, they are quite big. So also we have that problem. We couldn't prepare the plants anywhere because it's a hostile environment. So we start with really small plants and they have to get used to the wind, to the drought and so on. And in the end, it will look green like the render, but not for the next 4 years. So lots of architecture critics will have a lot of fun with this building, and we hopefully then invite them in 5 years and say, look, you were wrong. But still, it's very nice. And you see this idea of a community here. If you stand on one of the balconies, you can meet lots of neighbors and hopefully invite them to barbecues and perhaps also meet the people in the tower on the other side. That's also really cool. Here you see the apartments. They're all super big and wonderful bedrooms and so on. And this is in the valley. You see the trees don't work yet, but it's really nice that the pond is actually a roof light for the lobby underneath. So that's really nice. We wanted to have fish in, but they poop too much, so that couldn't be done, sadly. Yeah. Then we tried to do that elsewhere, and then you see the prices going up. We tried to do it in a province town in Germany, and we know that the Germans like everything to be boxy or not so wild. And so we said, okay, we're never going to win this competition. So why don't we just send them a system like Jenga? So you can start the game and have a very German tower, or you could start to push it a little bit and then it becomes more interesting, or it can be iconic if you push it to the maximum so that that you have a really cool tower. So we did that and we won the competition with the most iconic thing. We also sent them a facade with the same idea. There's a creative factory we got from every creative there. We made a facade panel. And we said, okay, you can have like 25% facade panels, 50%, maybe even 75%. And then to our great surprise, they actually went for the most radical solution. And sometimes that also helps in terms of strategy that you show the alternative. And then this tower, and they actually wanted it. And we had this idea that they could ask the people of Kiel whether they wanted to have which one of the options, Jenga 1, 2, 3, and then the city just decided, let's go for the most radical one because it's going to be a really wonderful building. So that was a really good way to do it. But still, we work and the architects decide what's good for the people. So here we try to make this differently, because with the software in the future, perhaps everybody could live in a fully customized apartment. We customize many things already in life, and perhaps in the future it's possible to also have an apartment. So 17 students, each picked a client with a very big ego, like Marilyn Manson you see, and a desperate housewife, the guy from the Big Lebowski, and so on. So really different characters, and they had to design their dream houses, had good arguments why they look like that. All they had to do is work with pixels, so that that we could combine them in some way with the software. And then we start with a very rational shape for this building. And then in yellow, you see the flat of the guy. The Big Lebowski was, of course, one of these bowling alleys in his flat. So that was important for this person. And then the software is mitigating between all these individual wishes, and then tries to not make them less and tries to respect everybody's wish. And in the end, it then turns out into this very efficient tower made out of voxels, respecting everybody, and is fully customized. So this is then how it looks like. And you see it's super radical because we have a roller coaster, we have a climbing, all kinds of things that couldn't be done in reality. But in reality, of course, this is not as far away as you might think. All we need to do is that the construction prices go down a bit, perhaps. In any case, we were so lucky to build a prototype at Eindhoven Design Week. Students lived in it for 1 week, which was really cool. They had lots of visitors every day. And at night, they actually slept in there with sleeping bags and so on. Last project, we still have a little bit of patience. I want to show you what we did in Rotterdam recently with an art depot. We have this museum which was founded by the people that got rich in the port, and they all had different collections. One would collect furniture, another one classical art, another one modern art. And through the years, the summer rain, collection in danger, city gives some money to build an art depot. And the art depot actually, you know, there was enough money to build one of those boxes, probably next to a Lidl on the outskirts. And sorry, Lidl. And the director said that's really bad because this is the collection of the people of Rotterdam. They can never see it. Why don't we build in the city center, right next to the museum, an art depot? It took him almost 10 years to get enough funding, and he found a foundation that wanted to invest in this idea of an open art depot. And that's so not one of these prisons with high security, but actually a place where you can walk in and see 151,000 art pieces for the first time. 99% of the collection will be visible instead of 96% being taken away and only 4% being visible. So you can actually visit the entire art collection of the people of Rotterdam in this new building. That was the idea. Of course, we had to face a competition first, and the competition was very difficult because it was in a park, the museum park, which was designed by Rem Koolhaas and Yves Prunier, also next to a very affluent area, and lots of people actually walked their dogs on that area. There was a lot of gravel, so it was one of those places where you could let the dog poop and not scoop, because nobody would see it. So they were all against it. We also had lots of neighbors, a hospital, museums, and so on. So also in that sense, who do you face? And well, we start with the site, which is here. Bicycle path, always very important in the Netherlands. So we had to keep that free, so the site got a bit smaller. Of course, we couldn't build a basement because it's so wet there. It's right next to the museum, so that would flood somehow. And we had a really big program, 15,400 square meter. What an enormous building. Our first idea during the competition was to have a table that would be safe. The art is hoisted up in security, and it would be symbolic for the safety of the art, because maybe one day the Netherlands will flood and then the art is still safe up there. You don't have to do anything. But then in this competition, the budget was a really big issue, because the moment that you would go over budget, you would be disqualified. So every design we sent to the cost consultant sent it back, said no. And whatever we did, it was always no. Until one of our architects actually looked at this and said, what's really expensive in this building? Well, first of all, the MEP, of course. We have 7 climate zones in this building. And so that's something we cannot change. But we also had very heavy security walls, and actually so secure that you need to hammer with an electric hammer for 5 minutes before you even have 1 centimeter of way in there. So that was super expensive. And if you look at this cube, how can you reduce the facade? Of course, the easiest thing is to come up with the cylinder, then you have much less facade. So we sent the cylinder to the cost consultant for the first time said, yes, cool, that works. And actually, you're quite below budget now, so you can start to design now. So with this given that we had this cylinder, we then could actually start the competition for real and work on this art depot. First of all, we made the bottom smaller, so to destroy less of the park in a way. And we actually have a 10-meter span. So the top is 20 meters wider than the bottom, which is really nice. And that makes room for a really big public space on the roof that you can see the city of Rotterdam. And the idea was also that you can see it for free, because all the other places in Rotterdam where you can up, you have to go up, you have to pay. It also solved a problem with the neighbors because they all see the same building from every angle. Nobody is looking at the backside of the building. They all look at exactly the same thing. It sits like a sculpture in the park. And then we thought about sculptures, and what about the millennium, this bean in Chicago? What if we actually cover this building in reflective material? Then instead of seeing the building so prominently, because it's really big, maybe you see yourself, you see the city, you see the sky, and also the building, of course. Also funny is that you can look around the corner, so you can actually see things that you couldn't see without this reflective material. And towards the top, the volume actually dissolves because it takes on the color of the sky. At night, the few windows, because you don't really need windows in this. And I was today at the V&A in Dundee, and you also see that they have their shows. Also, we have this, and the reflective material actually makes the facade quite alive, even though there are hardly any windows in it. Now, we had the problem with trees. They were all dying, and because it was so wet, so they took away the trees under a lot of protest, but they were all quite sick. And the trees are in a tree asylum, recovering. And the idea was that we would actually compensate and put trees on the top. Problem was these trees wouldn't survive on the rooftop, so we had to work with birch trees that were then prepared, and they had 5 years of growing time to be prepared for the roof. And this is how we then won the competition with this kind of image. And then we had to actually build it, which is nice. We started with casting on site for the lower levels. And it's really crazy because you have huge doors, of course, and they're secured. But you know, they're not as safe as the concrete, and we still had to work with all this big concrete. But that's the regulations from insurance company. It's also good energetically that the air conditioning in the building is not changing, or like the climate. On the higher levels, we could actually work with prefab, so that was friendly to the budget. As you can see here, they were made in factories and then brought to the site, put together. The lower part, you see the insulation in black, so it's heavily insulated, this building, because inside the temperature can never change. The air quality needs to be absolutely perfect. So these big walls actually are quite helpful. And then at a certain moment, we were putting the double bent glass panels, which are also reflective onto the facade. And then for the first time, you could see in Rotterdam the sun come up, not in the east, but in the west. So looking west, you see the sun come up, you see a bit of the facade, of the skyline. And yeah, this is then how we recently completed it. And then they needed first half a year to dry the building, so that all the systems work, so that the art is safe inside. And once they had reached that point, they actually started to move the art in. And that was another half year. So a year after completion, the building was still not open to the public because of the movement and the drying. Now then we have the loading dock, which is one of the few places that's not open for the public. The lorry can actually totally disappear, and you see the big door, it's like a bus door. These buses that actually totally close, and at night the building can be totally round and without any doors. Actually, you don't see the doors. Inside there's this big atrium, you can walk around it. There's a bit of daylight coming into the building, which is good. Then you have these shop windows towards the depots, so you can look in. And something super interesting happened. They devoted one floor only for private collections to earn a little bit of extra money. And one of the big phone operators of the Netherlands, they rented a space, 500 square meters, and this is how they do it. So here you see their collection. It's a really, really good collection, a lot of photography, digital art, and every time you go in there, it's different because they start to manipulate these racks. Super nice. The museum itself, of course, has the most space, and here you see one of the depots. What's really nice is that the art is not put in per period, or there's no curation. It's basically practicality only. So, and also super cool is that that the art and you will take the same route, because there's no, it's not two ways. There's not an art transport and a people transport. No, it's all the same, because you're in the art depot. So here actually we walked through, and then at a certain moment there was this priceless Mondrian painting coming at us, and we had to make way for it on its way to the depot, which is really cool. Here you see a wood depot, and you see lots of wooden objects, and the objects are put in there because of their needs for air conditioning and their size, which is really cool. And here you see then how you can go in there. You can go into a depot for 10 minutes with 14 people. 2 of them are from the museum, so you have a guide and a security person. And then you can basically stay 10 minutes. And in these 10 minutes, you breathe a lot. So basically the air conditioning is not getting, or the condition of the air is not getting better inside the depot. After 10 minutes, it's enough. Then everybody has to go out, and the air has to recover from this visit. Maybe you have heard about the graves in Egypt and how tourists actually sweat in them and destroy them. And of course, here they cannot have this. So since recently, you also have to wear a dust coat, so that everybody looks like working in a laboratory in this place. And what's really cool is that you see art together and objects. Here you see chairs and a piece of modern art that you would never see together in a museum. So it's not a museum, but it's a totally different experience. Here, for example, the girls were laughing because there was this transgender or multigender airplane, and I was really, yeah, I thought it was super exciting that there is this really loud art piece, and right next to it there is this very delicate black dress, and the black dress still survived in this, and these two things together you would never see in a museum. Also nice that you can actually, this guy was interested in cars, and so the curator actually removed a bit of the plastic so that he could see this art piece. It wasn't to his liking because it was made out of couch leather, so it's it's a car that is not really a car, but yeah, it's a visit that this man will certainly never in his life forget, because this was especially done for him. And if you then walk through there, it's like being on TikTok, and it just comes at you. Crazy amounts of art. You can walk in 10 meters through the entire European art history. And funnily enough, I believe that the classic art pieces are, with their golden frames, they create their own context, while modern art sometimes has this feeling of a charity shop in there, which is really, really strange. But everybody has a different experience, and walking there is super nice. And if they're nice and you're interested and you maybe have a request, they actually can also help you a little bit more personal. So they can open the rack and you can see what's on it in more detail. And here, for example, they opened this rack and there was a Monet hanging. And this lady had a lot of fun with the Monet, and there was her personal date with Monet. And you see, it just comes at you. There is so much, and it's totally different. Now, the family really appreciated this painting, and the guy talked a lot about it. And it was not part of the collection that is in the museum. So you see that suddenly, actually, all this art comes to life. It is being looked at. It is being valued. Also here, I thought that was really amazing. That was for me a nice experience, because you have this Hendrik Averkamp painting, which just hangs there like it's no big deal. But in the Netherlands, during Christmas, you get these Christmas cards with 17th century leisure moments on the ice. And that's actually part of this. So this painting has been, and quite a few paintings of his have been taken for these Christmas cards, and I thought it was amazing. You can also see art from below, from above, and from the back, and that's also really cool. Here, for example, you see a painting from the back. It has a few stickers that says where it used to be in exhibitions, and also you see the signature and the title of the artist. Very precious artist. She painted very detailed and neatly, but on the backside it just. So that was a surprise to me that she didn't care too much about this. The building is 95% open to the public. Only the distribution downstairs, the security and the quarantine are closed, and everything else you can actually visit. Also really cool is that the staff of the museum has a new life. They were put away in the basement, you know, that got flooded all the time. Then you have the roof, and you can see the city of Rotterdam and how its Chinese speed and development. We're busy with the second reconstruction of the city, lots of construction sites. And yeah, also you can take a selfie, also very important in buildings these days. It's not something that we think about when we design, but somehow it works. And here I took one. Right, so this is it. And what's so nice about this is it's not a competition for the museum, but it's rethinking typologies. And I think this is something that we're trying to do all the time in an increasingly complex discipline. Architecture used to be much easier than it is today. You have all these stakeholders in this building process. They come from every side: sustainability, engineering, public participation, all kinds of other things. They all hit you, and the architect needs to be this person in the center. And by doing all this, it becomes very easy to just give in and make a blunt box because maybe the market demands it or whatever. But you see that we are trying to fight a lot, and we are trying to be better. And our clients usually tell us that they don't like the process because we talk a lot and we test their ideas and we try the impossible. And then afterwards, they're usually super happy with us that the building was realized, and they come back. So we have like 40% of returning clients, but that doesn't mean that if we make one project successful with the client, that the process in the next time will be much easier. No, there's still all these forces come onto architecture, and I think one of our ways to deal with it is that we are trying to combine things like apartments and a market. And we always want to think about what can a building also do. And very important question is, what does the building participate on an urban level, and how does it improve society? So I hope that I showed you some of these things, and maybe you want to become my friends on on LinkedIn or Facebook. And if you have any questions that you don't dare to ask right now, then you can also ask them on social media, and I usually respond. Right, that's it. That was my roller coaster.